See, you're planning to design a drop-dead gorgeous brand identity for yourself. Or maybe you just need to create a really great graphic for a promotion you've got coming up. What's the first thing you do? Are you jumping on Pinterest and looking for inspiration? Or are you getting on Canva and finding the coolest template that you can just use straight away? The problem with this strategy for designing something is that you're missing a crucial first step, and that involves writing. Before you leap into visual inspiration, you need to write. You need words that are going to fuel your visual search, and you need words to get clarity about what your actual goals are, the direction, what you're trying to achieve with this graphic. Everything in business starts with writing, even design. Everything that you need to create and do in your business starts with creating a plan, which means that you need to write things down. Unless, of course, you're just holding everything in your brain. But when you do that, then you're using up brain space that can be used for creating and coming up with ideas. So it's unnecessary. When you get things out on paper, it actually makes everything easier. You're not using up mind space for things that can be written down. And you can see things from a different light when they're written down. You can look at them more objectively. When they're just spinning about in your head, it's a lot harder to really figure out what's going on. Think about it. When you make plans, you write. When you create content, you write. When you're coming up with new products, you start with writing. And when you get a new client, you're writing emails, you're writing contracts, you're writing briefs, you're writing ideas and plans. As you can see, writing is an essential first step if you want things to go smoothly. And it doesn't always have to look like super long pieces of writing. Sometimes it's just dot points or, just a quick mind map or keywords. It doesn't have to be this big, long, fancy spiel all about it, but you're getting words on paper. If you skip ahead and start just designing something straight away without writing things down, then you're going to end up getting frustrated, feeling like something isn't quite right, and the whole process is going to take so much longer because you didn't first set the groundwork. Now, you shouldn't always leave writing till you actually need to go and design something. It should actually become more of a habit, something that you always are doing. Have a notebook on hand, always be jotting down little words, ideas, thoughts, different things that you're thinking about with your business. Anything that's going on in your head, start brain dumping it, because then when you need to create graphics, you've got this whole world of ideas that you can draw from. You can look back and get some more clarity about, where am I going with this business? What am I trying to communicate here? What are the things that my customers and audience are saying to me? And then you're going to be able to design with so much more intention, because you can really think about what you want to be communicating, what you've noticed is resonating with people, and utilizing ideas that you had before rather than just forgetting about them. This way, you're never starting from scratch. You always have something to start off with, and then you're not stuck in those times when you're just looking at a blank piece of paper and don't know where to start and end up just going for some template or something because you're lost for ideas. You've already got heaps of things to work with. So how does writing actually play into the design process? Rather than me just saying, oh, you need to write stuff, how do you actually go about this? How does it actually play a part in designing? So when there is a client and designer relationship, the first thing is a brief. So the client is briefing the designer saying, this is what I need done. So if you're designing for yourself, you might think, well, I don't need to write a brief because I know in my head what I need to do. But even though you know what you need to do, it's really helpful when you write it all down, because then you're not going to miss anything. You're going to get a lot more clarity about what you're trying to achieve, and you're making the whole process a lot easier for yourself. It doesn't have to be some big, long, fancy brief, because yes, you do know in your head what you're doing, but just jotting down the key points of what you're trying to achieve. Consider things like, who is this actually for? Who's that target audience that this graphic is going to be aiming at? What does it need to communicate? What is the goal of it and the call to action you have? Think about, what is the purpose behind this graphic? Why do you actually need to create it in the first place? What's the aim of it? Because when you get clear on that, then it's a lot easier to think, well, how can I design it in a way to achieve that goal? Then what content needs to be included? What text, copy, images, anything that you've got that needs to go in there, make sure you're jotting that down so you don't forget something or later realize, oh, I forgot to mention that, Think about things like the actual text that needs to go in to promote it, maybe dates, maybe URLs, anything that needs to go in there. Actually write that down, and then you can really think about how to structure your design so that everything is included. Then what brand guidelines and style do you need to follow? What kind of things need to be used in this? So do you have certain colors, certain fonts, things like that? If you've been designing graphics for yourself for a long time, these things might come really easy and you might not need to jot them down. But if you're just starting it and you've only just recently come up with your style guide, you may need to note down some of these things. And then also consider, what is it going to be used for and what size and resolution does it need to be? Actually think about how it's going to play out. So if you initially thought, I'm just going to create a graphic for Instagram, actually take the moment to think, well, is it going to be used elsewhere as well? Am I going to be repurposing this? Do I need to create it bigger so that I can later use it for print? Actually think that through and write it down so that you can approach it in a way that makes it easier for you to repurpose as well. Once you've got your brief written out, the next step is mind mapping. So this is where you start thinking about ideas and just be writing down keywords and phrases. And then from those words, you're starting to spurt off other ideas. So this is where we just let our mind get open and start coming out with different concepts. So maybe you had a concept around the idea of copywriting. So maybe from that you could write things like typewriters or iPads or sketchbooks, and then from each of those things you start branching out more ideas. And it's amazing how you can come up with really cool ideas by going through that mind mapping process. You might come up with something that you initially wouldn't have thought of. Once you have that mind map of keywords, then you can start brainstorming. So you can start going into more depth from the ideas that you've come up with, start brainstorming full concepts. So maybe you thought, oh, I really like the idea of the typewriter, so maybe I could find a picture of an old typewriter and maybe I want to put a little sketchbook next to it. You know, you start brainstorming out some ideas that you might use. Then you might be thinking, okay, surely I've done enough writing now, let's go on with the visual research and start sketching out some ideas. Well, yes and no. You sort of have to do a mix of both visual research and writing at this stage, because the next stage is research. So as you start diving into research, you're going to be looking at visual inspiration and maybe even text and writing too. And then you might be wanting to do a combination of creating mood boards, writing down notes. It's sort of a combination here. Don't feel like it's just a writing only or a visual only. This is where we start to combine both worlds. So as you can see, a lot of writing needs to happen before you get into anything visual. And even as you start to move into the visual, there's still some writing elements going on. And the more time that you dedicate to this writing portion of the design process, the better results you're going to get, because you really set stronger foundations and you gave yourself more clarity and put more thought and intention into your design. So you're going to end up with something a lot better than if you just grab some random template and quickly threw something together. Which brings me to, what about those quick graphics? What about those times where you really know your brand style really well, you've gotten a good flow of creating graphics for your business, and you just need to create something really quickly, you know? It's just a graphic that isn't part of some huge promotion, it's just something you want to quickly mock up. Do you really need to do writing just to quickly mock up a graphic? Well, yes, but it doesn't need to be so complex. So when it comes to a quick graphic, when something needs to be done just quickly, you shorten that process. It still happens, but it's just a shorter process. So you might only be just jotting down a few little things and then you get on with the design. Don't think you should just completely skip it. It's still worth writing a few things down, even if it's just a few little keywords and thoughts. Your designs will always turn out better when you allow yourself to write first. Now, if you want to learn more about branding and graphic design and creativity, then be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.